So today we're going to have a discussion about digital transformation and the future of the finance profession. It doesn't, not going to come as a surprise to anyone. This is a profession that's been evolving over the past several years, and I think probably accelerating in recent years, and due to a bunch of different things. I mean, technology, number one, is making it possible for us to do a lot more than we could ever do before. And number two, the elephant in the room, the COVID-19 pandemic has kind of forced our hand in having to get creative in how we do things and come up with new and inventive ways that we can work with our colleagues and our customers and our vendors and all of that. And we had to find ways to do that when we're not in the office. So all of that has led to this evolution in the industry. You can move to the next slide, Steve, sorry. So I'm joined with a couple of colleagues here, and I'll introduce them in just a second. And we also have the man behind the curtain, that's Steve. He's controlling the slides, and he's going to monitor the Q&A panel. So you can go ahead and peruse the agenda here while I just go over a couple of points. Number one, if you've got questions throughout the session, please enter them in the Q&A panel. And I prefer the Q&A panel because it does get recorded during the session, and we'll be able to refer to it after the fact. If you enter it in the chat, it doesn't get recorded. We can't refer to it later. So please use the Q&A panel. We are recording the session, so you will be able to share it with your colleagues later or refer to it again if you want to refresh your memory on something that's happened. It'll be on our YouTube channel, but we will make that recording available to you by email after the fact as well. Next slides. So joining me today, we've got Dave Rumer. He is a VP of Market Development with Sage, based out of Toronto, and he works with us Canadian partners to spread the good word about Sage and the partners and this evolutionary journey, this technological, I guess, evolution that we're all going through. And we have one of our customers, John Hughes, who's the Chief Financial Officer for Ventura Orthopedics Medical Group, and John has been going through his own transition over the past little while. So say hello, gentlemen.
Thank you, Peter. Pleasure to be here.
Thanks for joining us. And of course, there's me. I'm Peter Graychuk. Yes, that's how you pronounce that, even that way. I'm the VP Sales with North 49. Next slide, Steve. So North 49, in case some of you probably already know us, but some of you may not, we've been a Sage partner for, well, 30 plus years. All the principals and a lot of the people involved in the organization have been working with Sage and Sage products for probably most of our professional lives. We work with a number of different organizations, professional services, nonprofits, even some wholesale distribution stuff. We help companies go through this transition of digital transformation. And so, I understand that a lot of people do their own research, but you don't know what you don't know. And we're here to work with you as a guide and an advocate to help you kind of navigate all of that, so you don't have to feel like you're going through it alone. Somebody who sort of does this every day, this is our day job, we do this, we can help and guide you. And we're also a software publisher. So as well as being an authorized partner for Sage, we're a development partner, and we publish products that enhance what Sage does. So the customer portal is one. It works for Sage 300. We're migrating it into Sage Intact. And we also have a fully integrated web store that works with Sage 300 if anyone's interested in that. With that, I believe, next slide, Steve. Let's introduce Dave Rumer, let him introduce himself and carry on with the discussion. Thank you, Dave.
Thank you very much, Peter. As Vice President of Market Development in my role, I'm very fortunate to spend some quality time with our customers across Canada and across North America to hear firsthand how they are tackling the challenges of today, building high-performance teams, and empowering them with advanced tools like Sage Intact for the future. Today, I'm going to spend some time talking about the evolution of the CFO and the Office of the Finance. And along with John and Peter, we're going to discuss how CFOs and their teams are driving value for their organizations. The Office of Finance, as we all know, is on the cusp of tremendous change. And with the confluence of several factors, the way work happens has evolved clearly over the last 12 months, and these trends were already in advance before the pandemic hit. We are mobile, digitally social, we're flexible, and adept to change. And this new dynamic has made its way to the role of the Chief Financial Officer and his or her team. Their role has undergone more change, I believe, in the last 5 years than the previous 50. And the rate of change is not slowing down. Not since Luca Pacioli, the father of accounting, did his work on double entry in the late 1400s has there been this much excitement in the profession. The tremendous advances in technology are having a serious and disruptive effect. And I use the word disruptive in a very positive manner. A few months ago, Sage released a survey report detailing the impact of digital transformation on the finance department. The survey results identified 3 broad themes, and this survey result was driven by 1,500 CFOs across North America and globally. So it identified the role of the CFO is evolving. CFOs are driving digitization within their organizations, and positive changes are underway. So let's take a moment to walk through some of the salient points of this evolution. Moving on. Going to talk about the evolution, moving from the Office of Finance, moving from scorekeeper to really strategic business partners from 1, 2, and 3. The CFO 1 clearly, added a lot of value, commonly known perhaps as the historian, someone who, had high financial acumen and views of finance, and largely their role was to gather information that gave a clear view of the historical views of the organization. Moving to the next level, CFO 2.0. This is the real-time analyst, someone who can use real-time data to help their organizations gain strategic insights. And moving from CFO 2.0 into CFO 3.0, this is where it's a new type of trailblazing finance leaders. They are the visionaries. They are not only leveraging information, historical information, but also they're using that information. They're leveraging modeling and financial modeling trends and advanced analytics in tools like Sage Intacct to be able to look into the future, but take those insights and to be able to tell a story to the market, to the board, to their peers within the executive group within their organization or not-for-profit. So this is really the 3 levels. So moving on to the next slide, modernizing for growth and agility. And the CFO role in this survey noted that 97% have noted their job has changed significantly in the last 5 years. What is their biggest challenge is really, adapting to the role and modernizing business processes with technology, digital transformation, financial management, modernization. So these are the areas where they were looking for opportunities to grow. Next slide. So modernizing for growth and agility, clearly a lot of us as finance leaders are have accounting or financial management systems, but as our organizations grow, we're spending more and more time in spreadsheets to try to consolidate the organization to different types of revenue recognition, and we're really not able to get the manual processes or be efficient within their organization. Organizations, are looking towards Sage Intacct and North 49 to really help them be able to work within a multi-entity, multi-location environment, and certainly embrace the cloud, mobile, advanced analytics in the process. Next slide. So changes are definitely underway, as we all know, not only the changes over the last 12 months, but the changes that are coming up. And with these changes, the opportunity to have automation to really take manual processes, string them together and digitize them is certainly something that is a major one moving forward. And something that John will talk about, I'm sure, is really the workforce and the staff of the Office of Finance, and really making sure that they're in a position to really adopt and change through this digitization, not only within the financial organization, but across the entire organization. Next slide, please. Artificial intelligence and machine learning is something I really enjoy, and when I talk about the rate of change, the exponential rate of change that is coming in the next 2 years, it is as more and more organizations adopt a modernized financial management and reporting and analytics engine like Sage Intacct. But what's also happening is artificial intelligence. So services are being layered into these applications, and these are 5 use cases. Sage has set up the Sage Artificial Intelligence Lab, where we are doing deep research on artificial intelligence and machine learning and building it into our products. One of them is anomaly detection, to be able to catch outliers within the general ledger. Conversational AI, where you can talk and you can ask the system questions. Process automation, really, using RPA, robotic process automation within your financial management application. Recommender systems, and we've just recently released Sage Intelligent Time. It's an AI artificial intelligence-driven time management system for billable employees as they capture their time and move it forward in that manner. So moving on to the next slide. Organizations today want to transform their business strategy and processes I've just talked about so they can make agile, data-driven decisions for the future. They want to free their finance teams from repetitive tasks and empower them with active and trusted insights. That's why we developed the Sage Intelligent General Ledger. It delivers continuous accounting to reduce the close, so the books are always ready for reporting. It delivers continuous trust, so you're always accurate and compliant. And it delivers continuous insight from your transaction system of record. So moving on from the Intelligent GL into the journey of financial management modernization, the CFO and the Office of Finance are at a very exciting time of this evolution. Moving forward into these rapidly changing markets, finance leaders are under pressure to rethink how they serve the business strategically and operationally. Now is an opportunity to really develop the plan to modernize the capabilities of your finance and deliver even more value to your organization than you are currently. And as you prepare to learn more and address these challenges head on, it quickly becomes apparent. Intelligent solutions to support innovative approaches, collaboration, deep insights, and comprehensive analytics are the new currency. And with that, I'd like to introduce and ask John Hughes to join me. And John Hughes, CPA, CFO of Ventura Orthopedics Medical Group. And I first had the pleasure of connecting with John about 2 months ago, and I was thoroughly impressed and actually quite blown away by his level of knowledge. He is a true business leader, passionate about organizational health and leadership. He's a graduate from the esteemed and deeply respected Biola University in La Mirada. And he started his career with KPMG, and then he worked and gave his time to various organizations within the nonprofit world, and has been with Ventura Ortho for the past 6 years, leading their digital transformation and financial management modernization. John Hughes, welcome.
You may be on mute, John.
Thanks. Sorry, I forgot to press the button. Thanks, Dave. Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. And what I've experienced in the last 10 years in both the not-for-profit and for-profit space and the evolution, the demands on me to change and evolve my staff and the organizations as well, not just our role, but helping navigate the companies that and the organizations that we're with through this transformation. It's going to happen whether we like it or not. It's just a matter of when and how much we're going to embrace that change. So I appreciate your comments. I'm still trying to figure it out and survive every day. But if anything's taught us, we've learned anything from the last 12 months is that change is now the norm, and we need to be adaptable to whatever is thrown our way.
So John, maybe, I mean, I've introduced a little bit about you. Would love to hear a little bit about Ventura Ortho, and I mean, it's a tremendous organization, and then we can talk about the financial modernization journey and the process, but love to hear about the company. It's tremendous.
Yeah, we're down here in Southern California, just north of LA, about 65 miles, kind of tucked between Santa Barbara and Los Angeles, and on the beautiful coastline here of California. And we're fortunate enough to serve our county and community of almost 1 million people across 6 different clinical locations. We currently have today we're about 65 providers. 20 of them are physicians, surgeons, and then we have 45 physical therapists or physician's assistants helping provide care to our patients in various different ways. And so we're really trying to embrace physician-led, physician-owned orthopedic care, because that's where the primary point of care happens, is with that physician or physical therapist or assistant. And so we're looking to vertically integrate, to use the buzzword, and capture all things that we do musculoskeletal, which is the other name for orthopedics, in order to provide the best care. And as our mission statement says, really looking to impact the individuals that we serve, not only in the clinic locations, but through our partnerships, whether like those of us in the business side, our relationships with our vendors and partners in executing the business, the North 49s, the bankers, the insurance providers, they are all part of our organization. We want to be able to provide a positive impact in their lives and leave our mark in our community with our patients.
Clearly, you're improving a lot of lives through where you're serving, and no doubt there's a lot of moving parts that need to be organized. And you know, I know in our previous discussions, you know, in talking about Ventura Ortho and you know how you've built your team and your journey. So, at that point, why don't you tell us about, you know, the journey to financial management modernization, John?
Yeah, the last 6 years have been a whirlwind here. I stepped into a department really of me and an accounts payable clerk. And so there was really small, but yet at the time we were still in the, you know, almost $20 million in our operation. So not very sophisticated. I had my hands in a lot of areas doing a lot of things. And so right out of the gate, one of the first things that we needed to do was to really take hold of that, the general ledger, the financial tools that I need to rely on a day-to-day basis, and bring an element of modernization to it, not just in the technology, but also the philosophy and methodology. So spent a good portion of my first year identifying an improved financial reporting system and an improved methodology. And that's when I stumbled into our relationship with North 49, not stumbled. Sage was actually the matchmaker in that. And so went to Sage looking for a new product. We were currently on one. And that's when we were introduced to Sage 300 at the time. And North 49 helped me with that migration into that new system, a more modernized step from where we were, with a new general ledger environment, new chart of accounts, and a new accounting methodology. And so that was really the first step to our modernization journey, as it says here. So, and then in the last year, seeing not the limitations, but just the need for some more flexibility and different dynamic tools that we were limited by with 300, Intact became the next best step for us. And North 49 Pete and his team approached us and said, hey, would you guys consider this? Is now the time for you to look at a new environment? I have had some prior experience with Intact. And so for me, the decision was easy. I knew its flexibility, I knew its capabilities and what it could do for us. It was just a matter of convincing. I thought I needed to convince my team to make that jump. And as soon as I shared with them the opportunity of Intact, they said, let's go, let's do it. So they pushed us over the edge. And now we find ourselves a few months into the Intact environment, and could not be happier with that transition, especially given everything that we've encountered over the last 12 months. It's really set us up for the next season of our company, our growth, and where we need to go.
So had a Sage product, moved into Sage 300 implementation, and then now with Sage Intact. Mm-hmm. Certainly seeing a lot of interest in Sage Intact from our install base of Sage 50, Sage 300, clearly from QuickBooks customers and NetSuite customers. So other parts of the financial management journey, and I love what you talk about, kind of the philosophy of a CFO, and then, you know, your team and embracing change, and then working with you know, the other functional leaders within your organization, the ability to communicate. But before we jump into kind of that area, why don't we move into the next one and talk a little bit about the process of working with North 49. You're understanding it. It's obviously you had some experience with Sage Intacct prior. Maybe you can talk a little bit about the process through implementation and how you approach that, not only within your own team, but with the leaders across the organization.
Yeah, one of the thing that I appreciate, we were not, it's not a transactional relationship. And it really is a true partnership, because we have to dive into this together. And so we had the privilege of Jim Smith as our implementation leader, I would say, along with working with Pete and the other guys at North 49. But that there was a real collaborative spirit. There's a real sense of trying to understand our business, North 49 understanding our business needs. We had a constant conversation about, hey, what are we trying to do? What are we trying to accomplish? And this goes all the way back to 5 years ago when we started with North 49, and that conversation has continued to evolve as they've grown to understand us, and us growing to understand the system. They've been able to identify and help us see maybe different ways we can use the tool to suit our challenges. And so that conversation, that collaboration and partnership feel helped us to move through the implementation process, and what was actually incredibly smooth. This is the third or fourth ledger implementation I've been through in my career, and the Intacct one was by far the smoothest. It helped that we didn't change our chart of accounts too dramatically, but we also rolled in 3 other entities into a more consolidated environment. So there were changes, there were things we had to do different, but having the expertise of North 49 on the back end, really from a workflow, project management, implementation side, made our job a lot easier. We got to spend the time thinking about the things we need to think about and not worried about the transactions. Implementations are never perfect. They're never completely smooth. And we had our small road bumps along the way, but any little challenge we came across, especially working with Jim, he jumped on it, helped us get through any modifications that need to be made. There were always checkpoints to ensure the quality of the data that was migrated was done. I won't go into it. We had so many different layers of abnormalities in our implementation to Intacct. My controller, for one, was out for 4 weeks with an illness. So I had to take the reins of much of the implementation when I would have leaned on her. But there was an incredible amount of patience and perseverance through those little hiccups along the way, so that we could get to the right end result, not rush it, because quality is more important than quantity at that point. And we did need to hit our timeline, but we wanted to do it accurately and cleanly, and we were able to do that. So we had a very, very, I would say, a smooth implementation. It took time, but it was worth all the time that we gave it.
Yeah, maybe you can talk a little bit, because I know the audience today would love to hear about some of the decisions, and clearly with Intacct, many features are there out of the box, and it's really a matter of configuring. It's not coding in a third-party language to get certain features or workflow automation built in there. But you're making some strategic decisions. The chart of accounts, what dimensions do you set up, how do you tag them, and then you make decisions on how you configure the workflow to go through mass automation of the workflow. And then talk a little bit about, if you can, the dashboarding and the reporting, because clearly, moving from Sage 300 to Sage Intacct, you're moving from a segmented chart of accounts to a dimensionally driven one, and then the reporting capabilities, and so really, and the drill down capabilities are just phenomenal within Sage Intacct, and the ability to to glean anything that's in it. You've got real-time access to it, through various forms. So maybe, John, go a little bit about, the decision-making process along the way through the implementation.
Well, and if I can just add something as well, John, I know that the chart of accounts is a big difference, but the dimensional side of things in Sage Intacct, as opposed to the segmented, like you said, Dave, I think that maybe lends itself to a whole different way of thinking about things. And did you have to completely change your thought process about how you approach the chart of accounts? And maybe talk about that a little bit, because that's interesting.
Yeah, that's part of that philosophy and methodology. And I think when we talk about the modernization of the accounting function, the shift from segmented to dimensional accounting is the most radical thing that we as accountants go through. And I think for the not-for-profit space, it's extremely valuable because of the fund elements. And so a lot of the challenges in the kind of the marketplace and with the not-for-profit systems is truly trying to find the ability to do effective fund accounting in a non-cumbersome way. And I think that's where the dimensional attributes in a ledger designers are what those organizations should be looking for, so as not to limit themselves because that element of that fourth could be the fourth dimension or third dimension of the fund can really bog down a system. So Intact having the project attribute, which can be modified to the fund, helps eliminate some of that burden. So kind of a little bit of a tangent, but yeah, that shift away from the segmented system helps. I had to go through that migration many years ago in my head in the design. And so we finally have come to that dimensional model in Intact, but tried to fit a dimensional mindset into 300 previously, which worked. It wasn't a problem. But it made it a lot more challenging to manage because for the account, the department, and then what we use for our third segment, which is related to our medical providers, it creates a very long chart of accounts where if you have the thought of a dimension in head, you can make those things very easily accessible because you know your account codes, you know your departments, and you know whatever your third or fourth dimensions need to be. And then it's just a cube that you're having to work through. So that anybody that hasn't made that transition yet, it's a fun thought process. It's challenging, but it's worth it because that's when you start to see these systems start to open up like a flower, and the accessibility to the data is so much easier. So shift to the reporting, the dimensional, or the ability, the decisions for us to make to move to Intact. A lot of it was ability to move through those different dimensions with ease. We've had to rely on a different reporting utility with our 300 environment in order to effectively do that. It was wildly successful and helpful, expensive. So when we moved into Intact, we started to see us being able to do the same type of data mining. I can run a top level income statement and quickly click through the accounts and the dollars amounts spent to drill in to try and identify variances or any questions I might have in my top level reviews. The advantage there is then I don't have to go through and jot down all my notes, all my comments, all my questions, hand them off to my controller. They go look for the answers and then report back to me. I have all those things at my fingertips. So as the CFO, I can help do a lot of my own data analysis. I may not be able to do all of it, but I have it all right at my fingertips. I can work all the way back to the transaction level detail. And if we're using the system properly, we have the invoice stored in the system at that transaction. So I can now pull up the invoice. I don't have to call the AP team and say, hey, show me that invoice, send me that detail. It's right there. So in the minutes that it would take for me to ask the question, I've already got my answer. I can now free my staff up to do higher value work, the actual building some of those reports, doing some other human analysis necessary. And I have all that information at my fingertips. And I'm not also tied to my computer. I can do this on my iPad too. So just a few weeks ago, I was sitting in an airport in Burbank, interacting with Intact, approving payment disbursements, which effectively signing checks. I'm freed. I'm now not having to be at my desk to do what I need to do. I'm not tied to the normal environment, which is what this pandemic has all been about for us, is how to be out of the normal environment and continue the workflow with ease. And being able to do all those things were really helped us make the decision to move into Intact. We don't need to hire more people to do the work necessary. We have now a tool that helps us to move through the system more efficiently. One other comment, being in the medical space, we have a lot of challenges with the payments from insurance providers, the North American issue or US issue with our insurance providers, and we negotiate with them. We may have a lot of patient refunds that we have to send back. The ability to automate that refund process saved our accounts payable clerk, a team of one day a week of work. So in this implementation, we've already seen our workload cut down by one person's workload cut down by 20%. We can invest her time into other things, higher value work, analysis, identifying problems, improving processes, and we don't have to hire more people to it. So I think I don't necessarily believe it's easy to find ROI on software when it comes to headcounts and people. That was definitely one of the big ones I've ever seen in my time. So
Nice.
just a handful of things.
Yeah, no, you covered a lot, and as you know, I mean, I really loved how eloquently you talk about moving from a one-dimensional system to a three-dimensional system, and yeah, clearly you have to get your head around it. But once you do, you realize you can have a much simpler chart of account, but you have an explosion of ability to really analyze and look forward.
Yeah.
You touched, John, on something when you were going into the funds, and that really, and Peter, jump in as well. Is historically you think of an accounting system is an accounting system. Now it's broadened out into a financial management system, an analytics system, and you can store not only financial data but also non-financial data within the system and the confluences of the two. So maybe you can talk a little bit about that. And all of a sudden, through dashboards and reports, the other functional leaders outside of finance are getting tremendous insight into the business that they were never able to really get before.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, that's a new thing for me in the last few years, is being able to use the statistical data. I spend like everybody else, I've lived in Excel. I've had, my square feet analysis in Excel. I'm doing how much revenue per FTE or whatever the calculation is that we're trying to quantify. We can now put that into Intact. We can generate those. And as we need to update it, we can update it. I don't have to rely on my spreadsheets, which are so error prone. That I've made the mistakes that have really been severe through Excel. Now I don't have to lean on those. I can input that core data, the key drivers, headcount, providers, square feet, and all of our analysis that we look at. I mean, working days. I can see all that, and when we can produce our reports, we can slap the dashboards or utilize the dashboard tools now to put out to our key leaders so they can see the non-financial data that is really driving our decisions. So even when we can do the comparisons of just statistical analysis alone, and we're not just doing debits and credits anymore. There's so much more to the current CRMs, the financial management tools that are available, that the value add that we can provide if we're thinking creatively. And there's always the concern of accountants thinking creatively. That's the CFO 3.0. We need to think creatively and how we use these tools to maximize their value and provide information to the stakeholders. I mean, I say this often. I'm the steward of finance. Anybody that makes a decision in our company is a part of the finance team. And so I need to be the steward of that and get that information that helps them make better decisions out at their fingertips. And these are the not-for-profit folk probably understand this better than anybody. The key leaders of those missions or those missional organizations often struggle the most with financial data, or they hate hearing about it. But if we can get them bought in to see and to understand the financial implications of what they're doing, which can be done when it's done well and simplified, we've succeeded. And so those are, I think that having those statistical tools, those non-financial metrics, to be able to put them into our systems and pair that with financial data is where we're just going to, it opens up the opportunity for us as finance leaders.
Yeah. Well, John, clearly you're a CFO 3.0. You are a visionary.
And maybe there's a little bit of millennial in me. So I don't like that term, but maybe that's me. But I think there's some point. I think as CFOs and finance leaders are looking into the future, I mean, we not only have to look at what we're trying to communicate from our finance seat and where we need to go as business, but think about who's going to be coming behind us. Who is our workforce? I think you mentioned that earlier. Who are the people that we're going to be working with on our teams? These are the younger generations that are looking for tools like this, other tools, the AIs that are going to help them. They're going to sit there at their desk wondering, how can I do my job better? That's the mindset. Or how can I do it faster or quicker or eliminate or add value to what I do? Because that's the generational shift that we're in, and having these kinds of tools that allow us to eliminate the unnecessary work, the mundane things, to provide more meaningful value add work to help, especially staff level, tied to the mission and the vision of the company. I mean, that's huge. And there's and it's evolving. I mean, some of our tools that to see how they've the AI I think is a great kind of a little deviation here. I always wondered what AI was going to look like in our space. I just didn't. It's like I don't. I mean, I'm thinking, again, SpaceX launching rockets into the space and doing that autonomously. But what that comes back to, where AI applies to us, is the ability for tools to, when I scan a receipt on my for my expenses, for the AI to be able to identify the receipt, the amount, and automatically code that based on default machine learning. My expense reports have gone from taking an hour to 5 minutes based on that concept. So it's there, it's happening. How do we grasp that and pull that in wherever we can? Because that's where the efficiencies are going to come. And it's not expensive. That's the thing. I mean, we made this migration from 300 to Intact, and it's a cost neutral transition for us.
Actually, and you mentioned earlier too, John, that you're using this expensive, as you called it, other tool to do all of your, was it budgeting and analysis and stuff like that?
Yeah.
And you're thinking now that maybe you don't need that anymore. So you may actually come out ahead of the game when it's all said and done.
That's right. And it always depends on the needs of the organization.
Of course.
And so and for what we're using and what we have available to us, and really the culture of our company, this might be the solution we need for the next 5-10 years, but it's going to allow us, I go back to, it helps us to be nimble. Nimbleness is the key for finance right now. And I'm not good at it, but I'm always, how do I say yes? I want to always try and say yes to the organization, not be the no man, but say, yes, let's think about how we can do this. And now, so I need to have the tools so that I can say yes to whatever opportunities down the road and not be limited and constrained by, we can't do that because our accounting system doesn't allow it. That's the worst business decision ever. I don't ever want accounting to be the prohibiting factor in helping us grow or provide more services, especially to our patients or to any of our customers.
And you mentioned earlier how you wondered how AI was going to work and machine learning was all going to work in the profession. And Dave, you mentioned it earlier. Sage recently released a product called Intelligent Time, and this is for service-based organizations who bill out their time. And as you implement this product, and over time it learns, and it just looks at your calendar and automatically does the inputs. Because hey, what is the 30% of professional people's time that is supposed to be put on a timesheet gets missed and not billed? Mm-hmm. And so if you consider something like that learns over time and eventually is going to get to 90, 95, 99% correct, and you didn't have to really do anything except look for anomalies, and it's done, right? So this is one of the examples of how this is really going to advance the profession.
Man, I've been in, and as an auditor, I was in that world where I had to bill my time, and I still have that here. And today, as I do some side projects, man, I would kill for that because it was such a pain every 2 weeks to have to literally go back through my email and say, "Gosh, what did I do for the last 2 weeks?"
If you ever get the opportunity, John, that Sage, when we can actually get together again, there's an annual conference for users and folks like us that go with Sage Intact, and Aaron Harris, who is the CTO for Sage globally now, who was the CTO for Sage Intact, when he speaks and his vision of AI and the future of the profession is really engaging to listen to. So if you ever get the opportunity.
It's an exciting, exciting time.
Yeah, and it's bringing AI into practical use cases, as you're talking about, and the billable employees, and what our customers are realizing is $10,000 of additional billing per billable employee. So a lot of value that it is in that, and that's a service that comes with the project accounting module within Sage Intact. So let's talk a little bit about kind of what's next. John, for you and Ventura Orthopedic, and whether it's within the finance group, what's next? What's coming up? What are you excited about?
I'm excited about getting done with this pandemic.
Yes.
Because if anybody follows the news in the US, even today, there's changes every day. And so like I said, this is the new norm. And so what I'm really excited about is continuing to embrace the power of our tools. I'm always trying to maximize them and get the most out of them. So we've been only Intact for now 3-4 months. We still have a long ways to go to be able to really capture and harness all the data. So I'm excited to start bringing in a lot more of that statistical data, looking at how we can eliminate manual reporting that we've continued to have to do, just given the nature of our the tools we have available to us, and then start integrating. The Sage marketplace is huge. And so we've got a few things from our time and record keeping or our payroll system, as well as our expense reporting tools, to start pulling that data in. And so that, again, to leverage the AI, let's leverage the machine learning so that we can get rid of these manual processes and start doing higher value work. You know, I've loved this last season in the sense that it's allowed us to be so remote from our teams. Not that I don't like being with my people in an office, but we're able to be home with our families and continue to do the work that we need to do with ease. And so how much more flexibility is it going to give us to be able to do our work wherever we want to do it and however we want to do it. So a lot of what's next is continue to look around the corner and seeing what's coming and being prepared for the next wave of chaos. I don't, you know, who knows what that is? Market volatility could easily be it. But we want to continue to position ourselves as in our space as being nimble, being prepared for the next opportunity. We may not know what that is, but I just want to be ready for it today so that we don't have to be frantic tomorrow. And so that's kind of where we're cleaning up our process. We're cleaning up our tools to be ready for what's next.
And you're leveraging the creative juices that are flowing for sure. So
it's fun.
Yeah, absolutely. And so it should be. You know, accounting and finance is fun. You know? Before we move on to the panel discussion, John, I've got one serious question for you. Are the LA Dodgers going to win the World Series again?
Okay, I'm a baseball fan first, and then I'm a Dodger fan second. But as a baseball fan first, it's hard to imagine them not making another big run for it. Not having David Price in the rotation last year, and now adding Trevor Bauer. I mean, that pitching staff is solid. So it's going to be I think we're going to see in the West, the NL West here. We're going to see some really great games against the Padres, and it's going to be a fun baseball season. I cannot wait for April.
Well, watch out for those Blue Jays.
Yeah, the U.S. Blue Jays now.
Anyway, yeah,
they can't go home yet.
Yeah, let's move on to the panel discussion. That was a great, thank you both, John and Peter, for that. So let's move on to the panel discussion and move into, you know, where should organizations start with digital transformation? I mean, clearly, digital transformation and financial modernization, as we heard from John, it's a journey. And then every company's journey will be different. The broad goal, however, as we've heard, is prioritize your investments to achieve the highest impact and focus on efficiency and strategic value to your organization. So open it up to John and Peter, your thoughts on where you start with digital transformation. Digital transformation can be very simple, from taking outdated technology and modernizing it. It could be taking a series of manual processes and digitizing it and automating it, or it could be much broader. An organization is going through an entire transformation and really enhancing digital. So there's different angles, different options. Thoughts from both of you gentlemen?
Well, maybe I'll start with a comment. I mean, dealing with organizations like John's, I mean, these guys, obviously they get it. So they're a lot easier to work with. But we come across, you know, in our profession, folks on all different sort of levels of sophistication, I guess, and understanding about what this profession or what the Office of Finance is all about. And you know, people have been doing it the same way forever and ever and ever, and they just don't think there's anything wrong with it. And until you're exposed to a better way, you don't really know. So I guess what I would challenge any organization to is really look critically at what you're doing and how you're doing and where are you spending your time, and is that time better spent elsewhere? And the minute you start looking around at the options that are out there, you start to realize that, wow, we're in the dark ages here, or we could do so much better with not even a huge investment, really. And this is something you don't do that often. I mean, I guess, John, you guys have done it a few times over the years, but depending upon the organization, it might be something you only do every 7 to 10 years, is to change a financial system, potentially. I guess it depends upon how things evolve now in the future. But I think it's just looking critically at what you're doing and really evaluate where you're spending your time, and is that the best place you could be spending your time?
Yeah, I think on a company-wide level, an organization that's, if they're sitting there saying, how do we step into this? You know, this is a bit of an existential question in a lot of ways, and it's a as a finance leader, it's a little, depending on where your seat is in the organization, it may be challenging to create that shift or organizationally wide, but start small, and don't be afraid to start very incrementally. It takes time. It takes years. I think, Peter, you're right. Like that 7 to 10 year transit, it's a lot of work. It takes a lot of effort and energy. So we don't change systems very often. We're just a bit more, we're gluttons for punishment here, and that we've done it 3 times in 6 years. But we've seen this where I'm trying to lead a digital transition or change in a medical space, which is extremely difficult and archaic in some ways. And I don't have necessarily we don't have necessarily the top-down support for it. So we make little changes, we make incremental steps, and people become adept and assimilate to that change over time, and then soon they can't live without it. Just even in how we use our communication tools, there's so many different and new methods of communication, where emails going away or not the primary source, or other chat tools. And so how do we slowly introduce these things and get other people excited about it? So speaking from the medical world, where we've had a lot of technology mandated and pushed down on us, that hasn't gone well. It hasn't been successful. What has gone well is the stuff that comes from the bottom up, and we get our time, and we take our time to wrap our hands around it and our minds around it and say, yes, this is the right thing to do, because we can identify how it's going to improve those processes, how it's going to alleviate the heartaches that Peter was talking about. So I would definitely look at, I hate to say it, but organic transition, or again, micro steps, unless it's a top-down organization-wide approach.
And I think you made a good point there too, John, is to take it off in bite-sized chunks, because some of these projects can be very big. And so if you phase them in, start with the basic financial accounting side of things and move into the operational side of things, then move in, because there's so much you can do, and there's so many applications available out there. If you're trying to take too much on at one time, it becomes overwhelming, and you still have your day job to do while you're going through this transition, right? So you need to do it in manageable phases, and that's where folks like us will come in and say, if somebody came in and said, I want to do all this and I want to do it all like bang, stop now and start there tomorrow. It's like, you may not really want to do that. You're going to blow your brains out trying to do that. Take it a small measured approach where you can, and get accustomed to the system, get accustomed to the financial system first, and then move into the other side of it. And then, do it. I think it's a good point, because it becomes far more challenging if you try to do too much all at once.
Well, and then you get about 80% of the way there. And in order to get in that last 20, the last 20% is the hardest of anything. It's whether it's the last 20% of a conversation, the last 20% of a project, it's the hardest part. And so I'm totally guilty of moving on to the next thing and missing that last 20%, but taking that last 20%, taking the time to not start the next thing until you've gone to completion, or develop where you want to be in 5 years. Maybe today's not the day to implement it, but you have a roadmap of when it comes time, you've already thought down the road and say, great, we think about that with our chart of accounts. I've got 5 or 10 departments that we've never implemented yet. I didn't implement them, but I know they're there, and I have placeholders for them when it comes. So the decision's been made today. So when we're confronted with it, we don't have to go through the process again down the road, but we've spent the extra time to get all the way to the end. And so, I agree. Like, go slow. Try not to do too much. I do.
20% sounds a lot like my house rental projects end up at.
Is that not the truth?
Yeah, we've all been there. Yeah. So what I'm certainly hearing is take an agile approach to it. Similar to the implementation, John and Peter, that you're taking with Sage Intact. Putting in the core financials, the reporting, and then really adding on additional features, functions, different pieces of the organization. But the real, delivery is building confidence not only within your team, but across the entire organization, your investors, because you are adding value along the way. So, gone are the days of a 12-month, 18-month implementation where you don't realize value. So you're adding value and realizing, and be able to point to the return on investment for that value. So it's all good. So let's talk a little bit about the future. You want to learn from the past, plan for the future, and value and live in the moment. But let's for a second talk about the future. And technology clearly is playing a very prominent role in it, and the Office of the Finance, they have the ability to analyze exponentially greater data volumes for forward-looking insights. They can embrace the power of social media, mobile users, cloud computing. John, you were just talking about moving away from email. It's interesting, the Sage Intact collaboration capabilities where you can communicate across the organization within the tool, so you don't have to take financial data, attach it as a file to an email to get some insight. So one of them, capitalizing on the advances of artificial intelligence and machine learning, real use cases. And potentially even adopt new metrics for operations and valuations. And we've seen that as organizations move from an order-based approach to really a subscription-based approach. Peter, John, fire away.
Start with that one, John.
Yeah, I think the finance function has become so much, there's almost an element of it becoming more of a generalist in the business role. And we still have to carry forward our flag of expertise in the finance world and are the, in some cases, the chief accountant. I think I'm thinking back to the earlier slide you shared, the CFO 1.0. I think those are our controllers today, and they've changed too. And so the controllers are historian, and whereas we now have the CFO really functioning as the chief business risk manager of the corporation or the organization. So we're not only, risk is the common word that we're going to use in all of the areas of what we do. How do we move forward and grasp these big visions, minimizing risk along the way? And so when we can have these tools that allow us to identify risk points quickly, efficiently, see the trends, see them coming around the corner, that's where a lot of that value is going to come from. And also, and how we partner with, all the different stakeholders or the other partners in our enterprises. I mentioned earlier, even the risk management team. All these things are finance. They're all have massive financial implications. It's not just costs, but potential costs. So we're having to think about what is the risk tomorrow, or what is the cost tomorrow if we don't do this right today. And so I think those are kind of some of those key elements we're having to think about. And yeah, cloud computing was a big conversation 3, 4, 5 years ago. We're gone. That's almost behind us. Now it's all SaaS stuff. And how are we looking at these subscription-based services and what value do they provide? But just like our Pandoras and Spotify subscriptions, they start adding up. So if we're not careful, these things start layering on top of each other, and we've got too many to handle. So we have to think differently about how we're layering our technology and our tools together to create this suite of services that help empower and really provide the business tools necessary for the organizations to move forward.
And I think what really that points to is that the people who work in the finance office are now becoming more advisors, as opposed to just people tabulating the stuff, right? And technology
Absolutely
plays a huge role in making that happen, because the more of that routine, kind of redundant, predictable stuff that we can take off of your plates and just let the system deal with it, and all you have to deal with is anomalies, that frees up so much of your time to be able to do all that stuff that you're talking about, right? So the less of the mundane routine stuff that you have to deal with, the more of the analytical, advisory, all that stuff. Now you've got time to think. Before, if you're just stuck in there just pounding the numbers in there, you have no brain space to start thinking about any of that stuff. All that creative thinking, there's no room for it. But if you free up all that time, all of a sudden you have that ability.
And this is a comment that's going to thread through almost the entire conversation. That's why we have to, as finance leaders, we have to develop systems that are leverage the systems we have to create a good enough, I hate to say good enough, but an environment that's, the general ledger is general for name. We want it to be general. We don't want it to be too specific. There is data coming out of our ears everywhere. So how do we identify the most necessary data, the key data, eliminate the noise, and focus on what's most important? Because there's a lot of good things that we could be doing. There's only a few things we should be doing, and we need to identify what those are so we don't get distracted with the good, the nice to haves. We need to focus in on the need to haves. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where these things are. I think that's part of what's coming down the road. And our organization, I'm sure a lot of our audience hears the same thing. When somebody has a question, they don't know who to go to. Where do they go? They go to accounting. They go to finance, because we have our hands in everything. And so that's where a lot of that generalist, I've watched that for us. I get website questions. I don't know who to go to for this. And so I'm lumped into it. So we have to be adept and aware of what's happening all around us.
Excellent. As I started off in part of what I talked about, I mean, it's exciting times for the Office of Finance. It's exciting times for the CFOs. I mean, just, Peter and John, you sharing, your obvious passion and I mean, and I still, I do believe, like several other industries that are out there, the Office of Finance is being disrupted by technology. I mean, it's an impactful driver, a disruptor, and an enabler in business today. And, therein lies the opportunity, but it's not technology for technology's sake. It's, what value is the Office of Finance, certainly adding 2 years ago, today, and 2-3 years into the future. And, I think it's as I said, the Office of Finance, to your point, John, people are coming to you and will continue. And although the Office of Finance has driven tremendous value for the organizations, I see it, the Office of Finance being the key, really visionary and being able to tell the story through the data, the relevant data, John, that you just mentioned,
exactly,
to move forward. So listen, there is one quick question, Peter, maybe you can use this question. It's actually for you. Inspired by John and the work that you've done with North 49 is done. Question is, how do we connect in with you, Peter, or North 49 to understand, and get a view of their particular organization and how could they move forward or connect with you?
Yeah, okay. So really, I know that most people out there anyway, are going to do their own research online if they're thinking about a new system or what have you. I mean, and that's expected. I mean, 99% of people out there are probably going to do that, but we do this every day of our lives, and anybody else who's researching this doesn't, so they can only go so far. So really, we're really here to be a guide and an advocate to help you navigate through all that stuff, because sometimes you're not going to necessarily understand what you're looking at. What we want to try and do is understand an organization's need, as John said earlier. We want to dig down in there with you and understand, what is your process? What are you doing? How are you doing it? And when we understand that, now we're in a better position to recommend or suggest improvements to process, what technology might be used to help that as well. So from us, it's we want to understand it like right from I think John said, an organic way. How are you doing things? Why are you doing it this way? Is that the best way to do it? We just need to know this stuff before we can make any recommendation. So we like to spend a day in your shoes, I guess, so to speak, so we can understand that. It's, I mean, I guess everyone's going to say this. I'm going to try and sell you something that's going to be of no value to you. If I can't identify a tangible value to making a move to another system, I'm not going to recommend it. It doesn't help you. It doesn't help us. I mean, we want people ultimately like Ventura Ortho who are happy with the process and happy with the result, and will continue to see benefits as time goes on. And things may get added over time or whatever. But again, with us, like John said, it's a partnership. We need to understand first, and then we can be in a position to make recommendations. So it's a thorough process. I mean, that's really just part of it. You don't want to do this more than a couple of times in your lifetime if you can avoid it, unless you're like John, he likes to do it every couple of years. But for most people, it's something you don't want to do a whole bunch of times. You want to try and get it as right as possible every time that you do it. If you're with the same organization once or twice in your career is probably all you really should have to do it if you make the appropriate decisions. So we're here to help, guide, and advocate. Like I say, that's what our role is.
Absolutely. So let's move on to the next slide and wrap things up. I mean, this has been, thank you, Peter, for inviting me to join. It's been a real pleasure kind of to get to know John as well through this process. And John, thank you very much. I mean, it's just pearls of wisdom. Thank you for sharing, your thoughts, your experience and knowledge. I mean, I think you've given us all a lot to think about. So Peter, over to you to finish things up.
Yes, thank you both for joining us. Really appreciate that. I hope everybody who was watching found it interesting, useful, enlightening. John, some great stories there, and great, I guess, wisdom about what the profession is all about and where it's going. So, I know I took a lot out of that, and I do appreciate your guys' time. Thanks, Dave, for joining us as well. And Steve, the man behind the curtain, thank you for running the slides for us and monitoring the panel. If anyone ever would like to chat with us or discuss your situation with us, my contact information is here on the screen. We'd be happy to have that conversation. I guess that's it. We'll thank you all for joining us and do appreciate your time and enjoy the rest of your day.